There we go.
All right.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jennifer Keller, the programming coordinator of the Westport Library. And this evening, it's going to be a tasty talk about a dumpling cookbook called Let's Make Dumplings. Before we get started, I have just a few notes. You can type questions at any time during this conversation in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will make time to include your inquiries. And if you'd like a bookplate signed copy of Let's Make Dumplings, you'll be able to access the purchase link until 9 o'clock tonight. We will send you an email when the books have arrived and the book plates are in them. And remember, as always, books make great gifts. Just saying. So, Let's Make Dumplings is the third food book collaboration between chef and writer Hugh Amano and illustrator Sarah Becan. Hugh is a graduate of the University of Colorado and the New England Culinary Institute, and he continues to explore food around the world. Sarah has been drawing comics since she could hold a crayon, and she started in food and culinary illustration with her autobiographical webcomic, I Think You're Sawsome, which is a great title. Sarah's work has been published in several publications, and their previous books are Let's Make Ramen and The Adventures of Fat Rice, which we will be asking about later. For tonight's cookbook discussion, I reached out to a novice home cook in the community to help out with some recipes. Robin Myers is a library supporter and a member of the Verso Volunteer Squad who helps out with producing the live streams from the Trev's Forum. So welcome everybody. And I just want to say thank you all so much for coming out on the Monday before Thanksgiving. And I hope this inspires somebody maybe to make dumplings for Thanksgiving. I'm going to get started with a question that I think is on everybody's minds, but I want to know how you two met and decided to work together on food books.
It's
back when, but I'll let Sarah tell
it. It's kind of a long story, I guess, but I had been working on this webcomic called I Think You're Sawsome. That was sort of a food diary, autobiographical stuff, things that I was going through during the day, but a lot of it ended up having to do with food, new ingredients I was learning to cook with, or new recipes. And that's where I started drawing recipe comics, like food recipes in comic book format. And at the same time, a lot of the things that I was putting into the comic was local restaurants that we were visiting that had just opened up and like sampling new dishes that they were having. And so one of the restaurants that opened up in the neighborhood was Fat Rice. And my partner and I went there and we had a delicious dinner and I ended up drawing the meal. And I think I reached out to Fat Rice on Twitter. Hugh was working there at the time. He helped open the restaurant with the head chef. And I started doing commercial work for Fat Rice then, like making posters for them, menu designs, t-shirts, hot sauce labels, things like that. So then when Fat Rice got the book deal to put out a cookbook, they wanted some of the recipe comics incorporated into the cookbook. And that's when Hugh and I really started working together.
Oh, cool. Hugh, would you like to partake in that story too?
There's a little tidbit there that I always like to talk about, and our actual first introduction to Sarah's work as it pertained to our restaurant was this beautiful drawing she did of one of our dishes. It's called the Portuguese chicken, and if you're familiar with Macanese food, a lot of it's done in clay pots. They're really rich, hearty, good, depending on where you're at. I'm guessing you're in Connecticut, so cold weather dishes like right now, tonight in Chicago would be a great night for these dishes. Point is, she came in, we didn't know her. She ate the dish, went home, drew the dish, a cross section of the dish, and then emailed it to us. And it just happened that night. We were kind of like kicking around ideas for how we were going to do some marketing and that kind of thing. And Sarah, it was lightning struck a little bit because the picture was so, first of all, it was so real. It was so accurate. And then, I mean, it was beautiful too. And it was really a kind of a match made in heaven at that point for, we were like, do we look for photographers? Do we start doing that kind of thing? And it really, for us, was like, no, this is the artist that we want to work with. And from there, Sarah illustrated our cookbook, The Adventures of Fat Rice, which was a bit of a hybrid between photography and illustration. But the spark for all this kind of came from, in that cookbook, there's a recipe for pot stickers. And we were sitting around in the restaurant one night writing the book, that was kind of what we would do. Is I would show up at the restaurant. I had moved on by this point, but I would show up around 5 o'clock on a Monday when the restaurant was closed, and we would work until 1 or 2 in the morning. A, because we're chefs, and that's kind of how you do it, and then B, that was the only time that we could do it, and we would crank out all this work. But we reached a point where we needed to show how to fold these dumplings. And there's some great dumpling books out there, but I don't know that words can really convey. And I'm a writer, and I don't say this kind of thing a lot, but I don't think in this case words convey the message enough. And so Sarah drew the pictures, and from there on we did a lot more. And ... we have 2 books together now, 3 books. So.
Great. So that's how you got into Let's Make Ramen as well, then, I'm assuming. It's just a natural progression.
Yeah, the publisher, 10 Speed Press, who put out The Adventures of Fat Rice, had also done a comic book cookbook with an artist named Robin Ha. It's called Cook Korean. It's also excellent. I definitely recommend that people check it out. It's chock full of delicious Korean recipes. And they had found her. She was doing a Tumblr project where she was drawing recipes for banchan, all the little side dishes that you get at Korean restaurants. And so they decided that they liked the recipe comics that were in The Adventures of Fat Rice, and they liked how Cook Korean had gone, and they were like, what if we did a ramen one? And so they reached out to me to see if I would want to draw it, and Hugh was like a perfect partner to work with on that. So that's how Let's Make Ramen happened.
Oh, cool. So Hugh, I'd like to ask you, why only Asian dumplings? What draws you to Asian foods that you need to write these books?
It's interesting because so my father is Japanese, and I spent tons of time in Kyoto and Osaka growing up. And when I ultimately became a chef, that was not my focus. Asian food was not my focus, and certainly not Japanese food. Not really for any reason. It's just not what you're learning in culinary school, and the restaurants I worked in. When this came up, I had nothing to do with the choice of ramen, because they reached out to Sarah, and it was like that was sort of what was decided. They kicked around the idea of having people with ramen restaurants do it and that sort of thing, but ultimately the angle was that I was able to do it a little more how a home cook would do it, not like a big fancy branded restaurant ramen chef, because Ivan Orkin, who's great chef, incredible ramen guy, his book is about his restaurant, and he helped us out with Let's Make Ramen, and there's a little section with him in there. And in our conversations, he's very much like, I kind of realized people aren't going to cook for my book, because some of the thing, like the dashi, the katsuobushi, the dried fish that he uses in there, there's like 15 kinds of dried fish that you have to go to all ends of the earth to get. And my angle has always been much more wanting the home cook to be able to accomplish these things. As a chef, it's our job to trick you into thinking you can't make this at home, and my restaurant is the only place that you can come and get it. And I don't like that. And I want people to cook at home. It's so much more about food. It's about so much more than food. It's about the act of cooking. And we were talking about Thanksgiving a little bit earlier. For for me, it's that the sharing and the community that it creates. So that's kind of the story with ramen. But as far as dumplings go and why only Asian dumplings, it's because I was very gung-ho in the beginning. Remember, Sarah, I was like, let's do every dumpling in the world.
Yep.
And,
We fought hard for that too. We
that'd be
wanted
like,
pierogies, we wanted raviolis, we wanted
right. Give me an 18 volume of 500-page books, it's just too much. So the publisher kind of helped us narrow that down a little bit by
right.
you couldn't do that.
Okay, so the next book is Let's Make Pierogies.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, sure, why not?
It's interesting that you said what you said about, getting the home cook to feel comfortable. I feel like with the last year of, us not necessarily being able to go to restaurants for a while, that a lot of people sort of refound their kitchens.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
sourdough bread.
I didn't, I'm used to cooking, but I even got bored with everything that I was making. And personally, this is going to sound horrible. I hardly ever use a cookbook, only because I'm too lazy. And so I actually, during the lockdown, I was pulling my cookbooks. I mean, I have a huge bookshelf of cookbooks that I never used. And then I was like, oh, let's actually look to see what's in it. So I think that I think it's probably more important now for us to know that we can cook for ourselves as opposed to relying completely on the stores or restaurants. So I thank you for that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the different varieties of dumplings and why there are so many different varieties?
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, the variety is in one of two things, either the filling or the way you fold it. And honestly, a lot of dumplings could be folded however you want to do it. And I think we try to express in the book, get comfortable with a style of folding. Don't try to emulate the dim sum masters when you go down to Chinatown, because these are people who do it for a living every single day. And to get some of the more intricate folds can just lead to frustration. Growing up, I grew up in a very small town in Colorado that you don't have a whole lot of access to different, exotic ingredients, despite the fact that, my father is Japanese. And we would get wonton wrappers to make gyoza and just fold them in half into triangles. And that was how we would do it. And that was that. As far as the more the kind of traditional recipes that we list in the book, or that we show in the book, they're just different fillings, and I really want to encourage people to get comfortable with how you want to do it, and again, that's the message in the kitchen, like what works for you and your family and the people, the loved ones you're cooking for. That's kind of the thing. But if you ask me what's my favorite dumpling, far and away it's gyoza.
And why?
Because that's what I grew up on. That's it. And it's delicious. I mean, pork and shrimp, green onions. It's just really a great. I'm nostalgic. I'm extremely sentimental, and especially with food. So that's why.
And Sarah, from working on all of this, do you have a favorite dumpling?
Oh, all dumplings are great, but my favorite is probably I love a steamed bao so much. It's just like a warm, pillowy cloud. And the char siu is my favorite probably.
And now we all have to go out and buy a copy of this book so we know what you're talking about.
It's a very sweet, spicy barbecue pork wrapped in like a steamed bao with like just really pillowy dough.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm just getting hungry. So, Carolyn, do you have a question for right now? Or I know one of your questions, but do you have another question that I want to finish with the question that you asked before?
Oh, the one I had posed to you that was going to say,
yeah.
Hugh, I'm going to have a party. What would two informal winter party get together with friends? What two dumplings do you think I should serve? Just a small get together.
So what I would say, do gyoza, because again, that's my favorite, and that's really it's really simple. I mean, all of these recipes are simple to make, and I think gyoza is a great one because you can do it. You know, you can cook it in different ways. Would be a deep fried, steamed. I like the pan fry where you start it frying in a pan, put some water in, and then cover it up and steam it, because you get a couple different textures that way, the crispy brown bottom and then the nice soft top. I would also say in our book, the kale and mushroom dumpling is it's great. I don't know who's coming to dinner, but it's vegetarian. And so you can trick meat eaters into loving this vegetarian dumpling. And then it's a vegetarian dumpling too, if there are vegetarians there. And those with the season as well, butternut squash and kale, it's just very seasonal and very appropriate for a dinner party.
Thank you.
That sounds good. So Robin, we're going to get to you now. Ha ha ha. Robin was a good sport. He took home this let's make dumplings, and I asked him to try out some recipes. So Robin, if you could unmute yourself and tell us which recipes you tried first.
Okay, now the two question. I had marked the dumpling, but basically we remember you think that you're doing a normal Western type recipe, and I'm not a great chef. I mean, again, the pandemic really sort of tweaked my interest in this, because we were eating the usual stuff and you just want something different. And so I was watching a lot of these TV cooking programs and baking programs, and it really kind of tweaked my interest. So when you asked me to do this, I was like, okay, I'm all over this thing. So you kind of approach it the way you would do a Western type recipe, where you would just gather all the ingredients and then just throw them together, and it eventually just there's your dish. What I didn't realize is that's actually a 4-part process, and you have to kind of figure that out a bit in how this works. And but I had a lot of fun, because first of all, it calls for that pasta maker thing, which is really for Italian spaghetti, and I haven't used that thing in probably 20 years, but I broke it out of the garage and I was about to wash it, and the first thing on the instruction says, do not wash it. So you got to actually just wipe it down with just a dry cloth, and if you need to oil anything, you take olive oil or something like that. But anyway, that is the one implement that I use. And then, so your first part is just making the dough. I mean, that is quite a thing. And I'm not a baker per se, but you have to kind of make this dough. It's very simple to make. It's flour and water. But if you don't know what you're doing, it won't go through that machine. And so my wife helped me all along the way. And so I must say it is a very social thing, because there's no ways I can do it on my own. And it became a really collaborative effort where she was like talking me through this whole thing. And every now and again, when we came to actually making the dumplings, we created almost like a conveyor belt type system, because once we had the pastry, then I made the sauce. And I chose a sauce which had chilies in it, but I overkilled it with the chilies, and oh my God, I nearly blew the top of my head off. But it had basically predominantly chilies and tomato and quite a lot of other spices, but it was fantastic. The taste is great. I mean, I have it here. And then, so we sort of started making with the dough, and it took a glass and just made those little rounds, like you call them. You would actually buy them in a store, but we made them, which is great. And then you make the sauce, and then I was looking at her and saying, but why is this ground beef lying here? She says, well, that's the filling. Oh, okay, there's a filling to this. And then I threw the filling with oil in the pan and started cooking. She says, no, it's got to be raw meat. So approaching this in a Western style will actually not work. You have to read this book at least through to the cooking methodology until you get to the point where it says, okay, this is how you make the filling. You have to know what it is that you're going to be, how you're going to be making every step of the way. And that's kind of the thing that I kind of enjoyed in this book. It also reads very quickly. I mean, the first reading, I read 55 pages in like 20 minutes. It was just, very quick. But you got to kind of like get with the program. You got to understand what it is. If I had to say there was something that I didn't enjoy, and I'm a bit of a neat freak, so as I'm cooking, I wash up and I clean up and whatever. I'll probably drive a regular chef nuts. And in fact, I do. I drive my wife nuts. She says, leave it alone until we're done. The thing is that your book refers to different components that you have to do. So to make the pastry part is one section of the book. Then you do the sauce, which is in another section of the book. Then you do the filling, which is in another, and then the cooking methodology, which is whether it's boiled or steamed or whatever, or pot stickered, is a fourth part of the book. So I didn't want to really touch the book because I had these dirty hands. So every time I had to literally go and wash my hands before I would touch the book, which is from, I guess, a downside of using a book. But I'm just kind of, you have to really prepare what you're going to be making if you use the book by marking each part and then knowing that you're going to have to stop 4 times in order to reset that book. That's the only downside of it. But other than that, I had a lot of fun, and my wife and I had an evening together drinking wine. In fact, she's drinking wine right now and won't be me until I'm done. But yeah, that was my experience.
So which recipes did you choose to make?
Goodness, can you come back to me? I'll have to find them. I did mark them, but the pages came apart.
Okay.
I actually went for the most simple. I mean, I can show you what we ended up doing. These kind of pastries. I don't know if you see that the camera only focuses on your head.
Yeah.
Let's see.
No. It's okay. We have a kind of an idea of what you've made.
Anyway, it's the ones where you take the rounds and you fold them in half, and you take a fork and then you just squish down the side. That was the easiest because my wife did try and do the folds, and then we were like, oh my God, this is never going to stick together, and realized you're going to do something that's, mortal humans can do. But
I feel like Hugh,
as I said, we had a lot of fun. Yeah.
Oh, great. So Hugh, what are sort of the basics then of making the dumplings now that Robin has sort of told us his process?
Yeah, it's interesting. During the book writing process, we kind of realized, so much of dumpling making is like the recipes they tell you what the filling is, and then the rest is kind of the same. So rather than every recipe being, because we have several ways of folding, several ways of cooking, we didn't want to waste pages doing that in every single recipe. So that's why the sections. And I think an interesting takeaway from this is that again, you'll develop your own style and how you feel comfortable folding it. I think the most simple one, I think the half moon is what we call it, where it's just, kind of how I described doing gyoza as a kid, just fold it in half and seal it. And you added your own little flourish using a fork, and that's great. And that's definitely how I did when I'm trying to think of, like, I remember that feeling of like using the fork where you're just wanting to seal it, And then the pleats they're kind of, it'll take practice to fold things a little more. They require a little more, not even dexterity, but just practice. But there's just so many ways out there. And like, I think I really try to express to people when I'm teaching or whatever, that at the end of the day, it's a ball of tasty filling in a chewy wrapper, and that's that. So however you end up, fantastic. You know, I taught a class for Milk Street not too long ago, and it was a virtual class, which first of all is weird because I was in an empty room talking to like 300 students, and you know, you don't really know like what's working or what's not working because there's no feedback like this. But what I was trying to say to so many of the people is you're going to end up with better looking dumplings than I have, because either you're more focused or maybe you're a surgeon and you're really good at doing little things like that. And so everybody's dumplings turn out different. And I think it's great that it looks like some of those were frozen and you kept some of them around, which is great, easy to cook, heat up later. So yeah, good work.
Great. So with these recipes, you can freeze most of them and come back. So you could have that dinner party and be able to just
absolutely
start cooking them at the party. Oh, fabulous.
Absolutely. And
great.
And you can even do, I mean, whether you freeze them or just kind of prep things the day before, you know, get all that heavy lifting of forming the dumplings, because it is assembly line, as Robin said. You're just producing the same thing over and over and over. So here's two things. You could either do that the day before and have them ready to go, or that's part of the party, is everybody standing around folding the dumplings. And that way you kind of trick people into doing the work.
I actually, my wife just looked up the recipes we used. One was the Momo Tibetan beef momos, which is on page 114. That's the filling, etc., the meat that I discovered I hadn't started working on. And she sort of said, "What about this?" I said, "What's that?" "It's a filling." Oh, okay. And then the sauce we made was a Tibetan Sepan spring chili sauce on page 192.
Yeah.
And oh my God, I overdid it with the chili spice, and I didn't have fresh with me at the time, but I've tried it subsequently because, yeah, that's it. But as I said, I made them where they're half round, and I just used the fork on the edges to seal it.
Sure.
And as I said, and then the sauce was incredibly spicy, but subsequently I've tried it a couple of days later, and it's really perfect. I mean, I just like the bite of that sauce. And my wife has just reminded me that I did, actually, I then looked just 2 pages beyond the recipe, and it says, "Oh, and you can freeze this." And so I said, "Oh, wait." Because I'd already told a neighbor that we're going to for Thanksgiving that I was doing this discussion and I had to make the dumplings, etc. She says, "Are you going to make some for us?" And I said, "Sure." And because I'm now frozen them, guess where these are going? So,
I wonder if your neighbor is watching tonight.
actually, she is. I told her to watch.
Oh, okay, good. So Robin, you would definitely use this cookbook again then, it sounds like.
Yeah, but I certainly would be a lot more prepared. I now know I've got to get those 4 elements that I'm going to be using and get the ingredients for each one of those, and then set them up almost like in stations. But also, I know my son's coming home for Thanksgiving, and since he was 2 years old, he's been eating sushi. I mean, it's unbelievable. He loves that kind of food, and he also tried to make a bao. Just recently, he's now a 23-year-old, but he battled. It's a real art to make these things correctly, and but he's very into Asian food and this type of thing. So we certainly sometime this weekend are going to be making dumplings again, and you know we'll all sort of chip in. But I think 2 in the kitchen is going to be plenty.
It's a good week to do it too. If you have, I mean, even cook leftover turkey, cut it up, mix it with like leftover mashed potatoes, stuffing, even gravy. I mean, it's, who knows how that's going to end up, but it's a good way.
What my wife just reminded me, what is the secret of making bao?
No secret. It's I think the thing that might be challenging for the Western palate or the Western kitchen really is the fact that you steam them. and we're not really set up for steaming. In the Eastern kitchens, you have a wok and probably a bamboo steamer, and it's kind of the wherewithal to do that. And in
Right.
kind of a standard Western kitchen, that can be kind of challenging. So I think that might be some of what limits it. It's also, it's tough. You have in your head the image of a bao, kind of how Sarah described and drew them, and that's when people who make bao, that's what they look like, and they're great. It can be challenging to get the right proportion of filling and dough, so that's that. Again, as with all of this, more practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
The bao was one of the ones while I was drawing the book where I was like, I've had the custard bao at dim sum restaurants, but I'd never tried to make it myself. And while I was drawing the recipe, I was like, I want this in my house, And yeah, it was very tricky to get because unlike with the wonton wrappers and the regular dumpling wrappers, bao dough needs some time to rise. And then it needs time to rise again after you've filled them before you steam it. And then, yes, I don't have a 5-tier bamboo steamer. I've got one steamer rack that goes on top of my rice cooker. So I could do 4 bao at a time and then set them aside and then do 4 more bao. And it took a little extra time, with the limitations, as Hugh said, of the Western kitchen. But having that fresh, plump dough bao was so good, especially right out of the steamer.
Yeah, I remember the first time we made Italian spaghetti using that machine compared to what you get out the box. It's like night and day. It's unbelievable how different it is.
Agreed.
So it sounds to me like the filling is really whatever you want in some ways. Is that true? I mean, are there certain sort of rules to the filling versus the dough?
I don't think so, and I think this is why in the world over the dumpling exists in pretty much every culture. It's what's around, what's available. You make it taste good, and you wrap it in dough. So that's why I kind of say the sky's the limit with that. Just like any other dish, you need to make it good and kind of make sense to whoever you're feeding. But it's just such a vast, you can do whatever you want with dumplings. I think there are probably a lot of people that would disagree with that, but essentially we went through the thing of what is a dumpling anyway, and when I looked into all the etymology of it and whatnot, and basically just like a pinch of dough boiled and eaten, and then it expanded from that. But we were like, is a tamale a dumpling? Is somebody asked,
a dumpling,
a hot dog dumpling. So,
and are they?
Who knows?
I mean, that's a way to start an argument, I think.
Okay, so
that's a way to start a new book.
No, but I think just to speak a little bit more on that, what Robin was saying about the way the book is set up, it's true that the recipes aren't start at the beginning. Here's how you put all the ingredients together. Here's how you cook it, and here's the end, because dumplings are a little bit modular in that sense.
Yeah.
Where we're using the same dumpling wrapper recipe on several of these, or the bao recipe if that's what you prefer on this filling, or maybe you like the gyoza steamed, or maybe you like the gyoza pan fried. There's different techniques that work on pretty much all of them. So yeah, so you can mix and match and do whatever's going to make you happy at your dinner table.
Because maybe in the beginning of the book, in the introduction, you could maybe put something about that to say, look, this is not a Western cooking book. You've got to treat it like so and so, and then kind of say the sections are, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, because the way I approached it was a typical Westerner. And as I said, my wife was like, why is the minstrel here? And I'm like, I don't know.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we do have questions from the audience coming in. So I'm gonna just jump in with one right now. Kathy says that many dumpling recipes are for large quantities. Are your recipes for smaller quantities, or can you cut the dough and filling proportions in half to save time, and would that work?
Absolutely. And I mean, you could cut it down even less. I think dumplings, though, are the kind of thing that, kind of as Robin said, it's a bit of a production. So, if you're getting everything out and getting everything ready, why not go through the whole process and then, make more and then freeze what you don't use. However, no problem. Cut it down to size for whatever works for you.
Oh, cool. And so I meant to ask you this before, but would one or three of you, well, Robin, we know that yours will come out foggy, so don't do that one. But Sarah and Hugh, can you show us the cover of your book?
Oh yeah.
I totally meant to do that earlier and I forgot. It is such a beautiful and colorful comic book. And obviously Let's Make Robin is too. I can't wait. I'm starting to get really hungry right now. I snacked before this, but my stomach is actually starting to growling right now.
The only question we have is that you called it a comic book because it was drawn, or because to me a comic book is normally the one where you have these bubbles, with going to someone's mouth and they say something, whereas your type of comic is slightly different. It's more instructional than.
Right. I mean, and there are definitely, we use the convention of speech bubbles and thought bubbles in books. But we call it a comic book because it is sequential panels that tell the story, as you go through panel by panel, step by step. And I'm obviously very biased about this because I want to draw more comic book cookbooks, but I do think it's kind of an ideal format for any kind of instructions in general, because you can pare down the information and make it as clear as possible, show you exactly what to do with your hands to fold each of these different shapes of dumpling.
So you know what you should do? You should syndicate each recipe and put it in the comic section of the newspapers.
I'd love to see that in the daily comic section of the newspaper. That would be great.
That would be, at least in the Sunday ones, you know? Oh.
Yeah, especially for food. Like I need the color.
Well, the New York Times has a Wednesday section for food, so
Next stop, the New York Times, Wednesday. Oh, Robin, you just made me forget my next question.
I'm sorry.
Oh no.
It's all right. It's all right. I'm sure it wasn't that. It was something about. Okay. Does anybody else have a question, Carolyn? I can't think of what I was going to ask.
Is there? What is a recent combination of dumplings that you were surprised yourself in? You say you tried different things.
Oh.
Boy, good question. It's hard to say because there was so much research done for the book, and then I was working on the book, and then we published the book, and then we've been doing various here and there, either appearances or classes and whatnot. And so a lot of it has been from the book. I think I might kind of cheat on this question a little bit and say one of the more surprising ones that we ended up publishing in the book, and definitely the most unorthodox one, is the egg and bacon dumpling, which is a nice soft scrambled egg with cooked in bacon fat, and it's delicious, and it's a great morning dumpling with that Burmese chili sauce that we put in here. You got to
wake you up.
So.
That does sound yummy. But yes, you just reminded me. Thank you, Carolyn. That was the question I was going to ask. How do you, because you do go into the history of these dumplings and you talk about the differences from different parts of Asia. So Hugh, how did you do that research? And do you ever need help with research? Because I feel like maybe I could, taste test if you needed. If Sarah isn't available to test every.
We are very, it's via books, via my own eating and traveling experience, via friends in the industry who are producing these dumplings. The research is from all over the place. And then as far as testing the recipes, I test most of the recipes. Traditionally for a cookbook, you kind of want someone other than you to test it because you're biased and you're going to skip, I'm not going to see things the way that Robin would see things. The end user, kind of difficult during the pandemic because a lot of this production was done during the pandemic, or at least towards the beginning of the pandemic. But I'll oftentimes have friends or that non-chefs do it, because chefs take shortcuts and no shortcuts and no, you know what I mean. It's better to have a normal cook do this, because ultimately that's who's using it, and that's why that matters.
Well, you have 3 new testers now,
Right.
so just email us for the next book. So what are you both working on now, or for the future? Are you working together on let's make something else?
Yeah, I think eventually in the future we probably will do another project together. But Hugh, do you want to talk about Vivant?
Sure. Yeah. So Sarah and I, when we started this, Sarah had other things going on. I had other things going on. And this has been a really great process, but we don't want to force another book, and I think when we published Let's Make Dumplings, we were kind of like, okay, what do we do next? What do we do next? Or I know I definitely was like that. And, just coming up with all these ideas, we could do baking, but there's a lot of great baking books out there already, and by the time it would be produced, everyone's into the sourdough thing, and so there's a lot of that going on. We could do, what else was there's just anyway, point of the story is there were so many ideas that we had. And we were kind of not really sold on all of them. So, we kind of decided to take a little break. I'm working on publishing a twice yearly culinary journal. So it's a little bit smaller. It's about 100 pages long. We're doing a single subject per issue, and again, publishing it twice per year. I just so happen to have a copy of the first issue right here. It's called Bon Vivant. And this one is all on wood fire cooking. So this is why I traveled a little bit to Montana and Utah just to do various cooking projects, based on wood fire. And so that's what I've been working on. And it's available now. You can find it at hughamano.com. And that's been a really fun project. And it's the kind of thing that can go on as long as we can pull it off. And we're going to, hopefully the next issue, which will come out at the end of April, will be on the cuisine of Baja California, because there is a ton of really interesting stuff happening down there. And it's a very different area of Mexico than the more, what the typical Northern American person might think. And there's a lot of great seafood, there's a lot of great wine actually being produced in Baja California, and a whole new cuisine called Baja Med that's based on the fact that they grow a lot of the similar produce as in the Mediterranean, just because it's a very similar climate. So looking forward to putting that together, and that's what I've been doing.
And Sarah, what are you working on?
I am just getting started on a project, making a comic book version of Portions of Flour, Water, Salt, Yeast by Ken Forkish. So sourdough again.
Sourdough, except for I'm sorry to interrupt, but Ken Forkish is the king of bread baking, and his book is a the Bible of bread baking. So that's kind of what everyone aspires to. So
it's been pretty amazing working with them so far, but it's that won't be out for a while. So
yeah. So we have another question from our audience today. Elizabeth asks, what types and brands of flour are best, and what do you suggest using?
ooh.
Yeah. So again, you're probably getting kind of bored with this answer, but real like what works for you and what you have around. I think I'm kind of a King Arthur guy. I think that was probably instilled in me in college in culinary school up in Montpelier, Vermont, just because it's right down the road. But it's also a really great product, and it's consistent. They have great recipes too on their website. So it's a really great product. As far as types of flour, again, we wrote all ours to kind of line up with what a person will have in their home, and it's all-purpose flour. There in Asian markets, you can get different types of flours, dumpling flours and whatnot, and they have different gluten or flour, the wheat protein contents, different levels of that. And again, like, yes, if you're making dumplings for a living in a restaurant and people are reviewing you and all that kind of stuff, you're worried about that stuff. If you're making this at home, all-purpose flour works really well. And I don't want people to go out and buy special things and special equipment. Robin mentioned we give the option to use the pasta roller to make the dough, but there's also, just using a rolling pin to do it as well. And again, you use what you have access to. And I think all-purpose flour, whatever you got around, that's great.
Well, that's great. For some reason, I too thought that there must be some sort of special flour that nobody's ever heard of that, if you walk to the country that makes it, you can get it, but you can't fly or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, those exist, but I would say don't worry about that too much.
All right. Well, so I think, Carolyn, you and I need to now put our money where our mouths are and try making some of these as well.
Yes.
I think, Hugh, you've almost calmed me down from the nerves of making dough. I don't bake because the idea of handling dough and having to be very precise has always scared me for some reason. Even though I'm a detailed person, so I never understood that. I think I just need to go to therapy. But I think, the way you're making it sound, and Robin, it sounds like it's not as hard as we all think it is.
Yeah, not at all. And I mean, you can, if you want to take a shortcut, you can absolutely go to an Asian grocery store and get wonton wrappers or dumpling wrappers. But one of the things that surprised me when we started working on this is that if you make the dumpling dough yourself, they're actually slightly easier to work with when you're filling the dumplings and cooking the dumplings.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then, and I mean, the sourdough is maybe a little more complicated in terms of getting the amounts right and the temperatures right so that it rises perfectly. But the dumpling wrappers are super easy.
I think there was a question by somebody who said, if you take half the quantity to make half the amount of dumplings, would that work? Let me answer the question, because we try to do that. And the quantities given in the book says it'll make 48 dumplings. So when you do the wrappers and you fill them, I ended up with about 36 dumplings instead of 24, because I thought if I break it in half. But one of the things I found with the wrapper is that you have to put in just enough filling so that you can close it and close it properly, because if you don't, and you then either boil it or fry it or whatever, the filling will come out. Yeah. And so, there's a trick, there's almost like the right amount. It's not a teaspoon, it's not half a teaspoon, it's somewhere in between. And, and we kept making until we actually used up all the filling. So that's why I ended up with like 36 instead of 24. But you know as I said, it was a conveyor belt, and we had a lot of fun.
That's the important part.
Yeah.
Right.
You
Yes.
know? That and they taste good. I mean,
Well,
that's
we'll
good.
figure that out on Thanksgiving Day.
Oh boy. All right. Well, we're almost at 8 o'clock. So I just want to say, Hugh and Sarah, thank you so much for zooming in from Chicago tonight.
Thank you.
This has been a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to trying to make dumplings. So Robin, you may have to give up the cookbook soon. Or I'll
Yep,
take it out
no
from the
problem.
library.
Yeah, you take it up in the library.
I'll
Yes.
take it out from the library. For those of you at home, remember that you can still purchase a copy that will get a book plate, or 2 book plates actually, one from both Sarah and Hugh. And that link is in the chat section, or you can access it through the webpage that you use to register for this event. And you'll get an email when the books are in and book plated. So thank you so much. And Robin, thanks for trying these out and telling
Oh, it
us,
was fun. It was a lot of
telling
fun.
us all about it. That was great. So thank you all so much. And I'm going to log off, say goodnight. And I think I need to go eat something in my kitchen now. I'm really sad that I did not think to get dumplings delivered to my house, but thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Yes,
And-
thanks for having us. Thank you.
And
Thank
we
you
look
all.
forward to, future books from both of you together or apart. It's good. We'll survive either way. And thank you all for watching at home. And remember that you can always watch recordings of Westport Library programs through westportlibrary.org. So thanks so much, everybody, and good night.
Good night.
Bye. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.